Alright, let's move on with our lesson, and here we come to the social context factor. That is the environment in which first language or second language is being learned and acquired. Of course, the child is within the environment of the family or maybe the nursery, and they're not expected to carry on a conversation easily and for a long time. However, when it comes to whether it's an adult learner or a young learner, there are social expectations in their environment to speak properly. And especially in immigration, these expectations are very high. Other contexts might be at school for certain second language taught subjects. For example, in Lebanon, that would be science and math in most schools. And if they're older, it might be in the workplace if they're not immigrants. Another issue is that new utterances are uploaded with encouragement. Caregivers would be totally happy and encouraging when the child utters new words. However, this is expected and for adult learners, and at some point it might be frustrating when they're not producing the language as expected. L1 is normally acquired in one's home, obviously, while L2 is in an instructional context, like language centers or school classrooms. In other, also in other contexts, which we will be discussing in our next chapter. So keep this in mind. There is more than one place to learn a second language. Finally, process happens spontaneously. That is, the baby is not taught to learn L1. You don't just carry this toddler and put them on a table and chair or on their high chair and start teaching them their first language. Okay, today you will learn how to say, I want to eat, I want to drink. No, it just happens spontaneously, automatically, and it is embedded within the child's daily play. However, when it comes to learning the second language, it happens in a systematic, organized way through teaching strategies and materials. This is what you guys are learning, how to teach the second language. Sometimes there's focus on specific linguistic features as well when we go into grammar, pronunciation, vocabulary, etc. Finally, long period of exposure for first language. It happens every day for several years, and well, most of the time it extends until death. However, there's limited time exposure of second language. Try to think. I'm asking you as students in Lebanon, or whether you were in other countries, when you learn the second language, how many periods per week do you learn the second language? If you learned the second language at a language center, how many sessions did you have per week? Let's say you answered 7 or 8 periods per week when you were at school learning second language. How often did you use it when you were back home? A lot of students don't use it at all, and others might use the second language with their family or with their friends. This is an increased time of exposure. However, it is not as extensive and long-lasting as the first language exposure. Now let's move to the attainment factor. By the word attainment, we mean receiving the language and acquiring the language. That is, when it comes to first language, remember Siri asked from the part before, child-directed speech and other speech adjustments actually help the children and are used by caregivers. This might happen in certain cases with adult learners where native speakers actually do these speech adjustments. However, it doesn't usually happen. Like, remember when you were learning English or French during elementary or middle or high school, the teacher did not do any of these CDS adjustments. Another thing is that the sequence of language skills differs from first language to second language. That is, think, what does the baby learn first? listen and speak. And then they move to reading and writing at school. Example, in Lebanon, we as Arabs, the baby starts talking in Arabic and they don't know how to read and write until they go to school in their KG1 classes. And it's not until KG3 or grade 1 that they actually read and write Arabic characters, letters, alphabets. On the contrary, when it comes to second language acquisition, the learner learns how to read and write first, and then they master, if ever, listening and speaking, and taking from your own experiences and experiences of those around you. It is usually listening and speaking that second language learners struggle with. Finally, speakers of L1 become fluent regardless of environmental circumstances, unless the baby does not have any speech impediments or disabilities. They eventually become fluent in their L1. And we're talking about normal cases where the child is exposed to the L1 from their family, from their caregivers. However, adults rarely become as fluent as native speakers. They might have advanced speaking and writing skills. However, when it comes to native speakers would still know the difference between a native speaker and a non-native speaker or writer. And this is something, sadly, we won't be able to cover this semester. However, there is an age limit. Studies have shown that there is a certain age where the learner cannot acquire the native-like pronunciation like native speakers. There is an evidence of an age limit. Now let's move to similarities. Pause the video again and try to think, and this is important here, and this is the purpose of our whole lesson. We are comparing a first language acquisition. We studied about the theories for the stages of development, but our purpose, our ultimate purpose in this course, and as a school of education, and for you as educators, is to know how second language acquisition happens and how to enhance second language development. So what do you think the similarities between these two processes are? Number one, exposure to language input is essential in both. If there's no input, no enough input, the acquisition process would be slowed down, or the language would be eventually lost. So we need exposure and input, and other than this, we need a lot of repetition, extensive amount of repetition. Unless we repeat the language that the child or the learner is received, they will not be able to produce it, whether orally or written, now that we're talking about second language acquisition. The third point is that both L1 and L2 learners use formulaic sequences or expressions, routines, which they use as a whole unit. What do we mean by these? There are examples in the book and there are examples in the Quizlet set. And formulaic expressions are actually very interesting because from our own experience in our everyday life, these are one of the things we learn first about any language. In Arabic, such examples would be صباح الخير, شكرا, أهلا وسهلا, الحمد لله على السلامة, etc. In English, they would be phrases like good morning, goodbye, thank you, nice to meet you, that's sweet, that's nice, how are you doing, I'm fine. All of these. We also know them from other languages. Let's say, think of French, bonjour, merci, de rien, je t'aime. In Italy, it would be ciao. From Spanish, maybe we know te quiero. Chinese, che, whatever. So these are formulaic sequences and expressions, and studies have shown that they actually help a lot when someone is learning a foreign language. And of course, you know from children, in your own environment, these are expressions which they learn early on, whether in English or Arabic and French here in Lebanon. Fourth, learners understand listening and reading more than they produce in speaking and writing, whether it is in L1 or L2. We tend to understand more than we are able to produce. And also from your own experiences and experiences of your friends and family, we usually struggle with speaking and writing and not with listening and reading. 5, learners develop and restructure their target language in a systematic manner. The stages of development are the same, etc. Typical errors such as overgeneralization, which we discussed before, occur in both cases. Again, they might apply learned grammatical rules on the wrong context, just like we gave in the example over and over again. Instead of saying go went, the past of go might be goed or wented. 7, in some cases, L2 learners begin, just in some cases, focus on some cases here, they begin by engaging in listening and speaking. When does this happen? In cases of immigration or other modern instructional settings. We will be talking about such settings in later chapters. So please focus on this slide and keep all of these points in mind because we will be referring to them later in lessons about second language acquisition. So now that we're done with our lesson, in conclusion, what have we covered so far? Number 1, L1 development. What are the stages? This is what you should focus on. Second, L1 acquisition theories and the L1 and L2 differences and similarities. You will see in later chapters that we will be referring to acquisition theories and these similarities and differences. This is why I ask you to please study well and keep all of these ideas I focused on in mind. Finally, when you're done covering all of this, please refer to the self-assessment exercise on page 26. It's a very simple exercise, multiple choice questions. I will be posting the answer key later on classwork. And for now, the materials that I'm providing other than these videos are, of course, you have to read the book pages. Try to read them, and if you have any questions, please let me know in the live session I will be holding after 2 days. There are also the Quizlet flashcards, the terms, study them, and finally, after the live session, I will be posting a Kahoot game that is not graded. It's just for you to practice and revise what you studied. Next week, a new lesson will be shared. This is why I ask you to please do not postpone studying and reviewing these materials. Thank you so much, and see you, hopefully, in the live session next period.